Welcome to Garden Angels, where each week we'll show you how to get the best out of your garden.
Now we've got plenty of hot months ahead, so I'm going to show you how to prepare the garden for summer, plus give you all the top tricks for great roses.
When you say summer, I think water lilies. I just love them. So I head up north and investigate some of the best water lilies you can grow right across Australia.
And speaking of water, if you do want to introduce it into your garden the easy way, stick around because I've got a water feature that you can try at home.
This is Garden Angels!
You don't have to try so hard, just let it happen to you. I'll make it easy for you.
Well, the office have asked me to do a story on water lilies, but down here in Brisbane, zip, zero, nada. So what do? Ditch the story? Or shall I go to Port Douglas? Well, of course, the thing about Port Douglas is it's a couple of degrees warmer, it's nice and humid, and here water lilies flower earlier, and they're absolutely magnificent. When it comes to choosing water lilies, you've got a couple of options. The native water lily is absolutely beautiful with white and blue flowers and massive big leaves with a nice serration on the edge. But now in the southern states, your only choice really are the hardy water lilies because they'll take the winter cold. They'll go dormant and then they'll come back up in spring and they're the first to flower in October and November. My all-time favourites are the tropical water lilies. They stand nice and tall and proud. They're fragrant and they come in all the blues and the purples. And extra special, there's one that flowers at night with red foliage and cerise flowers. Check this out, what a fabulous view. And in a place like this, you'd expect the biggest and the most showy flower. But you know what? I found the smallest. Come and I'll show you. This water lily is the first to flower and it's the smallest. It's an indigenous water lily to this area and it's absolutely beautiful. It propagates by itself. You don't have to do anything. Have a look at this. That's the new plant there. And when it's ready, it'll just drop off, float to the ground, stick in, and you've got a new plant. Now, the coverage of pondweed's really important because you don't want too much pondweed. About 50% is perfect. That means the sun can get down and you'll get more flowers. You know, if you don't have a pond at home, water lilies do grow really well in pots. Now, you can buy them a little bit like this at your local nursery. You need to give them a really good root prune around here, and they just need to be potted up in a pot about this size, so not too big. Put it in, just make sure all the roots are tucked in, and then a good potting compost right around. And just really press it in so there's no holes and air pockets, because you don't want that soil to rise to the surface and spoil the water pot. Okay, now the way that the soil's going to stay down is if we put a level layer of gravel. Nice big chunky gravel. Now the last thing is, don't forget this important crucial bit, a water lily tablet. This is the food that this plant needs for a whole year. So just press it in about 10 centimetres down. There we go. And then gradually lower it in. This water bowl is perfect. It's the perfect width for about 3 different plants and it's about 40 centimetres deep. So really, the next day, when the sun comes out, so will these flowers.
I get my chance in Angel's headquarters, the Veggie Patch. Now, I'm a bit excited. The weather is really warming up. Everything looks like it's put on a load of growth. I've even got the legs out. It's the middle of spring. Everything's beautiful. Some flower on the strawberry. There's even a bit of fruit, so I can't wait till that ripens up. Oh, and I see that there's leaf on the rhubarb. Of course, you can't eat these leaves. They're highly poisonous, so always just eat the red bits. And the artichokes, you can see all these leaves starting to pop through the soil. That's a bit exciting. More importantly, what am I going to do today? I've got a great idea. I'm going to make an Australian bush food section of our Veggie Patch. Well, this is the perfect spot in HQ for our bush food garden because we've got a backdrop of a lily-pilly hedge. And lily-pillies are renowned for having edible berries. They're mostly used in casseroles or even to make jam with. The main feature of our native food garden is one of my favourite natives. It's a relatively small tree called Bacchausia citriodora. These leaves can be used in a tea. You can also put them in cooking to give you anything that needs a lemon zest. The next plant that I'm putting in is, believe it or not, a native citrus. In fact, it's called a finger lime. And although you can't actually see any fruit on this rather thorny plant, it's a very interesting looking fruit. They do look like fingers. They're long and they're green, sometimes even black. And they're great to have in marmalades or at chutneys or even in a refreshing drink. Well, I bet you didn't know we had a native raspberry. We do. From the tropical regions of Australia, rainforest in fact. It's a sprawling, thorny plant, just like a regular raspberry, but delicious little fruits that you can pick right off the bush. Now, did you know that there are over 250 types of hibiscus in this world, and 35 of them are endemic to Australia. And this one in particular has edible flowers. And this is a really prolific flowering plant too. And if you need a dose of some greens in your diet, this is the perfect plant. It's warrigal greens. And you can actually eat it straight, get a bit of dust off it, straight off the plant. It's not too bad. Just like similar to spinach. So anything you'd use spinach in, you'd use this. And our last plant, which has another edible berry, is called the medium berry, otherwise known as Ostromyrtus. I'm going to space these at about ½ metre apart, and they'll reach a maximum of about 1 metre high. Well, herbs and veggies have all taken off. It must be this warm weather. And now we even have a piece of Australia in Angel's headquarters.
The weather's heating up and that means it's time to get out and dry-proof your garden. Don't know where to begin? Well, here's a few great tips to get you started. Every gardener is familiar with this situation. You go out, you water your garden beds and you notice that the water simply rolls off the surface of the soil, which is really frustrating. So what can happen is that some soils, when they really dry out, can become what's called hydrophobic. And what happens is they start to repel the water. So when you're applying the water to your plants, it doesn't get to where it's needed most, the root zone. So to combat this problem, you want to get your hands on a really good wetting agent. I'm going to show you how it works. Now this is a typical example of a soil that's hydrophobic. The soil is actually floating to the top. It's almost like it's trying to repel the water. And what a wetting agent does is it helps to break down that waxy coating that's formed on your soil surface or your potting mix, and it helps the soil to physically absorb water and get right down deep to the root zone where your plants need it most. Now, I do have to admit that it is a little bit ironic that on a day when I'm talking about dry-proofing your garden, it just happens to be raining. But look, don't let the rain fool you. A little sprinkle like this will only just touch the surface, and there are plenty of hot days to come. Now this garden is a sea of weeds. In fact, there's so many weeds in here that you can barely see these seedlings that are just starting to pop up. And it's really crucial that you remove your weeds at this time of the year because they start to compete with your plants for valuable water and, of course, nutrients. And if you want to make the job easier for yourself, do it after rain and try to catch those weeds early. All right, now take a look in here. Another essential thing that you should be doing to prepare your garden for summer is to get stuck into some good composting and get that organic matter straight into the soil. Because lots of organic matter helps to enrich the soil, but it also helps the soil to hold on to lots of moisture. Now, if you want the key to getting good compost, you want a good balance of greens, so that's things like your leaf clippings and all those kitchen scraps and garden waste, but also some browns, so get some leaves in there, a little bit of shredded paper and maybe some straw. Of course, the final tip for keeping your garden looking good coming into summer is to make sure that you mulch. Helps, of course, to conserve moisture, but also to reduce weeds and improve the look of your garden. And of course, if you use an organic mulch, it also over time helps to nourish and enrich your soils. So get stuck into these simple projects this weekend and your garden will be in tip-top shape for summer. Plus, you can make the most of any rain that does fall.
With the recent dry weather, some plants haven't made it. So what do you fill in the gaps with? Do you go for cactus and succulents from the deserts of Mexico? Or do you try something a little bit more romantic and flowering? Well, I've got a whole range of perennials that never need a drink. Wouldn't you want to be surrounded by this cottage garden? It's so romantic. The white wisteria, the cascading crabapple, and all these terrific perennials. Now, this one's called germander, one from the Mediterranean, silver foliage and blue flowers. It's from the mint family, and because of its silver reflective colour, it actually reflects the heat, making it perfect for a hot, dry garden. One of my favourite flower fillers. Flowers for ages, and it's called Jerusalem sage. It's not from Jerusalem and it's not sage, so it's a bit of a tricky one, but it does have these lovely lemon flowers that really bring in the bees. I can hear the buzz. Now, the felty leaves are full of hairs, and that traps the moisture, means you don't have to water as often. This is another plant from the Mediterranean. It's called euphorbia. I love it because of its colour, and when you go to the local nursery, you'll see different colours like pink, burgundy, and this lovely silver swan. And the reason why it's drought tolerant is because it behaves a little bit like frangipani with milky white sap, and that really means all the moisture is inside those stems and it never needs a drink. Gardeners everywhere is this dry shade under trees. It's a shocker and nothing much grows, but I tell you what does, the clivia, these wonderful orange trumpet flowers. Now, the reason why this is such a drought tolerant plant is these really wonderful roots. They're fleshy, they hold a lot of moisture, and you never have to water them. And you can also split them up, give them to your friends or plant them under other trees. Madeira copes with the hot heat by curling its leaves up so they're not in direct contact with the sun. Now, I have to admit, I probably wouldn't recommend a rose for a dry, hardy garden, but this rose is the exception. It's called Rosa mutabilis, and it comes from China. The buds start out orange, it fades to pink, and then it goes this beautiful peachy colour. It's tough as old boots, and it really is great for that dry cottage garden.
roses are the queen of all flowers, but they're not as fussy as you might think. And armed with all the right knowledge, they're really easy to grow at home. So here's my list of everything you need to know to keep this queen happy. All right, so the first thing to think about is choosing the right position. And for roses, that means at least 5 hours of uninterrupted sun per day. If you grow them in too much shade, you'll get a little bit of leggy growth and fewer flowers, which we don't want. Now, the other thing you want to think about is good drainage. So make sure that you dig in lots of compost and well-rotted manure at least once a year into the soil. Now, of course, if you don't have great drainage, you can always grow them in raised beds or even in pots and containers. Now, I'm planting a variety that's called My Hero. It's got really super-sized pink blooms. I think roses have really proven that they can tough it out through real hot and dry conditions, particularly if they're given that time to establish. But if you do get a chance, get out there and give them a nice deep watering. I always think that the straw-type mulches like lucerne or pea straw, or I'm using a sugarcane mulch, are really good to use around your roses because they nourish and enrich the soil as they break down. Just make sure you don't put them too close to the stem to avoid collar rot. Now, unfortunately, roses can be susceptible to some pests and diseases, but it's now when growth is in full swing that you get out there and catch those signs early. Now, you'll often see signs of aphids feasting on new growth, and you can spray with a rose spray like this, or just go out there and squash them with your fingers or blast them off with the hose to help to reduce numbers. But one of the most pesky diseases around is black spot and powdery mildew. They're both fungal diseases, and come up close and have a look at this. This plant has the early signs of black spot. Black blotches forming, you often get yellowing of the leaves and of course leaf drop. So it's important when you see those signs to take off any of that diseased foliage and remove it, and make sure also that you remove it from around the base of the plant to stop those diseases from spreading. It's also really good to have air circulation around your roses. They like that. It reduces humidity in the canopy, and make sure when you're watering, you water at the base of the plant and not over the foliage. All of those things will help to reduce your incidence of black spot. But if you want a good old tried and true control recipe that's used by rose growers, try this. It's a combination of pest oil, bicarbonate of soda and water. You simply shake it and apply it to your plants weekly during the growing season. So that's from spring right through to autumn. Now, when it comes to pruning your roses, you should be pruning twice a year. The big prune, of course, happens in the winter time when the plants are dormant, but the second prune should happen in the summertime. That's when you remove about 1/3 of the plant, and make sure you also get in there and remove any dead or damaged wood. And of course, don't forget to also deadhead your plants throughout the growing season. Roses are hungry little fellas, and it's when they just start to come into growth in late winter, early spring, that you should be feeding with a rose-specific food. But it's now when all of those buds are forming that you should be liquid feeding every 14 days right through the growing season. You can also give them an added boost in December with a good organic fertiliser. So there's your really easy guide to growing fabulous roses, and it just goes to show that with a little bit of know-how and just a touch of pampering, you can have the best flowering roses in your street.
Well, we can all dream of having a water feature like this in our backyards. Obviously, a water feature this size isn't so practical, but there is a way that you can introduce water and the tranquility that it brings into the garden in your place, and it doesn't involve a single filter, pump, or any wiring. But you will need a pot, and this is a beautiful glazed example. I'd go anything over about 600 ml across will give you a nice big water feature. This in particular has already been sealed, and it was a pot, but we've plugged that so it's ready to hold water. So you can in fact use larger pots. Just make sure to plug that drainage hole and of course seal the pot so you're not going to be losing any water out of the sides. Now, first things first, the water. because we're putting fish in our bowl, I'm putting in a chlorine neutraliser because we're using just tap water. And that's about 1 drop per litre, and this is about 75 litres in here. Just like land plants, aquatics require certain conditions to keep them happy. There are floating aquatic plants. There are submersible aquatics, which obviously are at the bottom of the water. And then there's also bog or marginal plants, which are happy to have their root zones or part of the plant submersed and then dry at other times. I've got a mixture of these, and I've also taken into consideration their varying heights, so we can recreate a mini landscape in our pond. We've got the tall, beautiful submersible Louisiana iris. I've got the lovely texture of a dwarf papyrus, or papyrus as some people know it as. And then I've got a floater down here, which doesn't look too happy now, but when it gets in the water and it flowers itself, it will look quite nice. It's called a poppy, a water poppy, and it's got lovely big yellow buttercup flowers. The best thing about creating a water bowl is you don't have to dig any holes. In fact, you don't even have to take your plants out of their pots, well, with the plants we're using anyway. What I might need to do is prop them up a little bit. So I've got 2 bricks, and I'm just going to put that in the bottom of the water bowl and start with the irises at the back. Now, some plants will grow pretty fast, so you may need to divide them and even cull over time. Perfect spot for a water pond is in a dappled light position. Not too much sun, not too much shade. Now complete the picture with some goldfish, which are hardy fish. They're going to be producing waste. The plants will then in turn use this waste, break the material down and filter the water, oxygenate the water too, in fact. And the goldfish have an added bonus of eating any mosquito larvae, which you've got to love. Important to sit these in the water to acclimatise to the temperature. Leave them in for about 10 minutes, add half water to the bag, another 10 minutes, and then set them free. On Garden Angels for another week. But if you need any more info, why not visit the website?
I missed you last week.
Did you? Oh, in Port Douglas, yeah. I bet you missed
Totally
us.
missed you both.
She so didn't. Anyway, next week we've got a great show coming up. I'm showing you how to spruce up a dingy, dark old side passage.
Have you ever been told that you're a mushroom? You know, in the dark, no one tells you anything. I show you how to grow the best mushrooms at home.
And I'm going to show you how to get the kids off the couch and out into the garden, plus how to transform a city balcony from scratch. So we'll see you next week
On Garden Angels!